Time. What is time to you? For some, time is a social construct. For others, it is what we do not have enough of. It's what governs our lives. It is a vapor. It begins and ends our day. It goes on no matter how we feel or what we do. But what if your life was cut short? What if you knew today was your last day? What would you say to your loved ones, your close friends, strangers? Would you share your faith? Jesus' time was limited, yet he still loved. He discipled, he forgave, and he preached the gospel. So the question remains, if today was your last day, what would you do with it?
Come on, that's a question. That is a heavy, heavy question. If you knew you had 24 hours to live, what would you do with that time? So we're gonna enter into the last 24 hours of Jesus' life in John chapters 12 through 18. The sermon series is called In Conclusion. Today's sermon is called Rinse and Repeat. This is Jesus. Jesus' last week consists of the triumphal entry, right? Where he rides on a donkey and he comes into Jerusalem. He's on his way to give his life, and that's Sunday. Monday, he flips over tables. Tuesday, he's got a fight with the religious leaders. Wednesdays, we don't really know much. There's nothing really recorded. And now we come to Thursday. We come to the Last Supper. Friday night, he's about to die. And we come to Thursday night, he's got 24 hours to live. You ask yourself, if you knew you had 24 hours, what would you do? Who would you spend your time with? What would you say? I know for myself, I waste way too much time on social media and Netflix and doing nothing. Because we think we have so much time left, but if you knew, man, wouldn't you spend that time different? Well, Jesus knows that he's about to die. He's not sick, but he knows he's about to die. And so Jesus spends his time with certain people. He does certain things. He says certain things. And so as we go through this for the next today, Wednesday, Sunday, Wednesday, Sunday, Wednesday, for the next 3 weeks, as we go through these 6 chapters of literally a 24-hour time period, we'll go through what Jesus did and what he said. It's like a dad talking to his kids like, I'm about to go, I've got 24 hours. I gotta tell you something. It's a father's last will and testament. These are last minute instructions. This is his farewell speech, his final hours with his inner circle. These are important things before I go. It's a teacher and his disciples. It's like a dad with his kids. Here's what you need to know as you enter a new season. Just like we have winter into spring and spring into summer, right? Every time you go into a new season, you gotta make preparation. You prepare your clothes, you prepare your house, the air conditioner, all this, like there's all these preparations that gotta be made as you move into a new season. Jesus is trying to tell his disciples, I'm about to die, you're about to be without me. Here's what you need to know as you go into this new season. I wanna prepare you for what's ahead. Because not only are you now the disciples, but you're disciples that are about to go into the world and make disciples and serve the world and love the world. And you gotta know a few things before you do this. I mean, this is classic discipleship. This is Jesus actually making disciples that will make disciples. I once heard to evangelize, you gotta open up your mouth. To preach a sermon, you gotta open up your Bibles. But to make disciples, you gotta open up your lives. You gotta open up your home. You gotta be transparent. You gotta do life with people. You gotta get intimate. And so here we come to Thursday night. It's 24 hours before the cross. It's the Last Supper. All the good food is on the table. His closest friends are with him. But it's like sitting at the kiddie table. His disciples are acting like 2-year-olds, and a fight breaks out amongst the disciples, and they're all talking about, I wonder who's the greatest. And John is probably like, hey, I'm the disciple that Jesus loved, even though he wrote that about himself. Peter's like, yeah, you might be the disciple that Jesus loved, but I walked on water. And they're like, but you sank. Judas is like, hey, I bought all the food for the Last Supper, and I got it from Trader Joe's. No? You gotta think about that. Dad joke on 1,000. And he must have been like, are you kidding me, guys? Like, after 3 years of talking and showing you, you still don't get it. Like, this is my last night before I go die on a cross. This is the last night that you have me here, and you guys are spending the time fighting. So we get to John chapter 13, verses 1 through 17. It says, it was just before the Passover festival. This is holiday season. It's time with good food and friends and family. This is supposed to be a happy time, right? Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Love is the theme throughout the entire Gospel of John, especially in this last 24 hours of Jesus' life. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. I asked myself, man, when did this happen? What part of Judas's journey did he allow the devil to jump in his heart? I mean, along with the other 11 disciples, he had the best front row seat you could possibly have. I mean, he's with Jesus. He's got godly fellowship. He's got good friends. He's in a good community group. He's watching miracles happen. He's actually taking part in the miracles. He's listening to the sermons and listening to the parables. But at some point in Judas's life, man, Satan jumps in his heart. We know that Judas was already stealing from the offering plate. We know that he thought that he could do better with God's money than God could. This is not an offering message, but we have to be careful because we can easily do that with our times, talents, and treasures. But God doesn't need all this. Like I could do better with. At some point though, Satan jumps in Judas's heart, which leads him to betraying Jesus. And the other sad thing about this verse is they mention his dad, Simon Iscariot. And that actually breaks my heart because Simon Iscariot is mentioned one time in all of history, in all the world, and for the only reason that he was the dad of the guy that betrayed Jesus. That's why it's so important what we do downstairs at Saints Kids, or what we do on a Friday night with Misfit or parents, what we do at home. What are our kids seeing? What's the example that they're seeing? What are we teaching them? Like that is so important. With all due, I want to make sure my kids are growing up knowing who Jesus is and loving Jesus and serving Jesus. I don't want my legacy because of what they do, because of what I didn't do. Verse 3, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power. Jesus knew. Jesus also knew that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing. New King James Version says it laid aside his outer garments and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Real quick. Like if today, if someone comes to visit your house, you would say, hey, can I take your coat? Can you want to take off your shoes? Do you want the Wi-Fi password? That's what we would say today, right? If someone was coming to our house. In those days, it was common practice to have them sit down before they actually walk in, and they would have their servant, their lowest level servant, wash their feet. They were coming from outside. Their footwear were sandals, and so they were walking miles in the dirt, in the dust, through donkey dung and animal dung. And so like they would have all this stuff on their feet, and so that as they walked into the house, one, so that they wouldn't track the dirt from outside into the house that they're walking into, also so that they just wouldn't have dirty, stinky feet, that they would be refreshed, that it would be like a fresh start. So they'd walk in and somebody would be there and to wash their feet to make sure that as they walk in, they're walking in clean. It says he came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, you're gonna wash my feet? Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." Then Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you, for he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean. And when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." Other versions say, happy if you do them. We want some happy happenings happening in our lives, but that only happens when you do what the Lord tells you. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. So it is Passover feast, Last Supper, last meal, family dinner. Exciting time, but in the middle of this last dinner, in the middle of all this festivities, the disciples are arguing about who's the best, and Jesus is like, like I can't even finish I can't even enjoy the last meal I have on earth without these kids fighting. After 3 years, you still don't get it. And he looks around at his disciples and he sees proud hearts and dirty feet. And he says, okay, let me deal with this. These guys need to humble themselves. They need a cleansing. They need to get into a different position. They need to know how to serve. So let me show you. And so let's start with serving. And 2 weeks ago, I preached a message here called Save to Serve. This is kind of a part two, especially the beginning part of this is a part two to Save to Serve. If you haven't heard it, you can go back and listen on our YouTube page. But serving doesn't mean less than. It doesn't mean inferior. It doesn't mean unworthy. It doesn't mean weak. It doesn't mean less intelligent. If it were, then why would Jesus do this? No, I'm not doing this because I'm weak. I'm doing this because I'm strong, because I'm confident in who I am. See, weak people can't do this. Weak people can't serve. But insecure people can't do this because they're always thinking, what will someone else think? Hurt people can't do this because they can't be vulnerable because they can't trust anybody. Proud people can't do this. This is beneath me. There's no way I'm doing that. So many times we're more concerned with where we sit than where we serve. Serving is a sign of health. It's a sign of a healthy heart. It's a sign of a healthy spirit, whether in church, in marriage, in friendships, in relationships, wherever. It's a sign that you're getting better, that you're getting stronger, that you are self-confident. See, I can take the risk whether you appreciate it or not. And after I serve this person, I can get up and be fine and serve the very next person. And one person's reaction to me in serving doesn't stop me from serving the next person. Because I'm not serving for you, I'm serving for him. I laid my life down, no one takes it from me. Serving isn't always the most fun or popular thing to do, but it is one of the main things that Jesus taught us. It's funny that we have so many leadership conferences, but we don't have serving conferences. We don't have following conferences. We have so many self-help books, but we don't have help other books. It's because we love power. Politics to pulpits to marriages to friendships to social media. We are power crazy. We are me crazy. The world's thinking on being a boss is the opposite of Jesus' thinking on the cross. The world's thinking on being a boss is actually what Satan was thinking when he gets kicked out of heaven. Like, I gotta be on top. I gotta be the most liked. I gotta get the most likes. I gotta be recognized. I wanna be served. I wanna be given. What's my name? I wanna be like God. And the desire to be like God isn't a bad thing unless it comes from a dirty heart full of pride and ego. He didn't come to be served, he didn't come for the healthy but the sick. He didn't come to destroy but to save. We've been called to change the world, and you can't do that until you pick up a towel. So Jesus shows us an example here with his disciples. Get low, get humble, get to serving, get to loving. And Jesus gets up and Jesus takes off his outer cloak He laid aside his outer garment and he wraps a towel around his waist. He gets in the servant's uniform. He strips himself of the outer, the exterior. Philippians 2:7 says, when Jesus came from heaven, he took off glory, born in a manger and was wrapped in a cloth, wrapped in a towel. He comes down low to serve. In the Old Testament, the high priest, when he went into the Holy of Holies, he would take off his outer garments to make atonement for all of Israel. Jesus, our high priest, takes off his outer garment and comes lowly as a servant to take on our sins and makes atonement for our sins. The very next time that we see Jesus getting out of his outer garment is when Jesus is going to the cross to die for our sins. So he gets up and he lays aside his cloak and he gets low. See, serving takes a position change. It takes a getting up and a getting down. It takes a stripping. It takes taking off something, laying aside something. I lay aside my life. No one is taking it from me. This is my choice. I choose to serve. I choose to love. I lay aside my time, my titles, my talent, my treasure, even my temperament. I serve the Lord with gladness. It's not just about what I do, but how I do it. Jesus watching our attitude and not just our actions. And the secret to success is service. And serving requires sacrifice. You cannot serve without sacrifice. You can't cut corners. It will cost you. The tuition to any next level is costly. Never expect a prize anywhere you aren't willing to pay the price. So, Jesus is about to wash these disciples' feet. That's your cue. We're gonna practice that next time. He gets up and gets low to wash 24 feet, 12 pairs of men's non-pedicured, nasty, calloused, stinky, dirty, dusty, ashy. Actually, all the guys that I asked to do this, I asked them to get pedicures. I kind of cheated because I'm not like, Jesus is better than me. So I was like, at least get pedicures, guys. So I was gonna use Dove soap for the Holy Spirit, but that was a joke. For time's sake, we'll do it like this. Obviously, Jesus, it says he wraps the towel around his waist and he washes each person's feet. We're gonna do that here. And so he comes to the first person. He comes to Simon the Zealot, and Simon the Zealot. Simon's a good guy. Simon. Because of the name the Zealot, it tells us that he was from a political party, and so he's very passionate about Israel. He was very passionate about their nation, and when Jesus actually calls Simon the Zealot, actually uses that same passion for Jesus. And but he says, come here. He says, if you want to be great, then you got to serve. This is what you got to do. And so he washes Simon the Zealot's feet. He comes to Matthew, also known as Levi. Matthew is a tax collector, the lowest of the low. People did not like tax collectors. In fact, if we remember where Jesus is actually eating with the tax collectors, all the Pharisees are like, ugh, how could you eat with sinners? Like those people, those are gross people. And as Jesus is walking, he sees Matthew in the tax collector's booth. Remember, tax collectors they would steal, they were grimy, and he sees Matthew and he says, hey, you come follow me. And Matthew gets out of the tax collector's booth and he follows Jesus. But he says, hey, if you want to be great, this is what you got to do, Matthew. So he washes Matthew's foot, washes his other foot. It's Matthew. He comes to Thomas, also known as Doubting Thomas. Thomas gets the name Doubting because he was known as being a skeptic and a pessimist. He was the guy that when Jesus rose from the dead and comes back, like everybody else took it for what it was. But it was Thomas who was like, I need to put my finger in the scars. Like I gotta actually see the holes in the hands and in the feet. And Jesus is like, okay, but We're gonna wash Thomas's feet. You could doubt all you want. You could be skeptical. You could be pessimist. We're gonna wash those feet and make them happy feet. We come to James. There's actually two disciples named James, and they differentiated them. And this is James, a brother of John. They actually call him James the Great. And he's sitting at the table like, who's the greatest? Duh, I got the name. Like, he thinks he's got the great card. And so we have James the Great here, who was a great disciple. I mean, he's one of the inner circle, one of the three. It was always Peter, James, and John, and they were with Jesus for Jairus' daughter's healing, and they were on the Mount of Transfiguration. I mean, this was the trio. This was the A team. But it was also James who, because he was puffed up, because he was a little bit maybe arrogant, where he goes to Jesus with his brother John, and they bring mom along, and they're like, Mom, ask Jesus for us. And mom's like, Jesus, when you go to heaven and we all go to heaven, can my son sit next to you? And Jesus is like, we gotta definitely wash these feet. And we gotta wash these feet. Come here. James, pick that foot up. Come on. Take a little exercise here. There we go. I'll wash that foot. We come to John, James's brother. John, the disciple that Jesus loved, right? Who wrote that about himself. Nobody writes more about love than John. We're in the Gospel of John. He also wrote 1 John. He also wrote 2 John. He also wrote zero creativity in his titles. He also wrote the book of Revelation, and he writes about love, and he writes about love, and he writes about love, and everything's love, and right, like everything's love, everything's love. For God so loved, he wrote that, John. Yet when there was some disciples, some other people, not one of the 12 disciples, but there were some people that were healing and doing some stuff in Jesus' name, like it was John who was like, hey, they're not part of us, stop them. Also, when there was some Samaritans that didn't accept Jesus, he was like, Jesus, we need to do like Elisha and call down fire from heaven and burn these fools. John, the one that wrote about love. We'll wash his feet twice. Come here. Come here. Up. 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 Good. Come to Bartholomew. Bartholomew was a little racist. Also named as Nathaniel. Yeah. He was the one that said when he found out Jesus was from Nazareth, he said, ugh, what good could come out of Nazareth? He wrote off that whole section of people as they're nothing. There's no way anything good could come out of there, and that was Bartholomew. So we'll wash Bartholomew's feet. Towel. Nope, underneath. Thanks, bud. I should have picked smaller guys. Guys with these big feet. Oh. We come to Judas. What I love about this is that Jesus knew what was going to happen. Jesus knew that he was going to betray him. He says it all in the verses. He knows what Satan already jumped in his heart. He knew he was betrayed. He knew everything that was happening. And despite the betrayal, and despite the heartache, and despite the broken relationship, despite the abusive relationship, despite what he was, Jesus still serves Judas. Jesus could have waited like an hour, because Judas actually leaves the dinner early. He could have waited an hour, yet he's like, nope, I'm gonna still serve Judas, because Jesus serving was not predicated on what Judas was doing, but what Jesus knew. Jesus knew that God had put all things under his power. He knew that he came from heaven. He knew that he was returning to heaven. It wasn't what Judas was about to do, but it was about what Jesus was about to do, die on the cross, even for his sins. And see, when we know that we are saved and loved and redeemed and forgiven and appointed and anointed and blessed and highly favored, then we can still serve, even when people abuse us and accuse us, even when people treat us wrong, even when people do all these horrible things. I can still serve a Judas. This is a moment where Jesus actually washes his betrayer's feet, who in moments is about to kiss him and go off. No 30 pieces of silver, no kiss on the cheek, no nails in his hand, no nails in his feet could stop Jesus' love for even Judas. We come to Judas Thaddeus, also known as Jude. I believe he kind of changed his name because he was like, there's no way I'm going to be associated with the other Judas. And so he's over here, and we don't know much about Jude except he asked the question. He says, Jesus, are you just going to reveal yourself to us? Like, aren't you going to reveal yourself to the whole world? And he seemed overly concerned with this question, but Jesus is like, no, I'm going to reveal myself to anybody that loves me. We come to Philip. Oh, Philip was a good guy. He was an evangelist, one of the first disciples. But it was Philip when Jesus was feeding the 5,000. When Jesus was feeding the 5,000. And Jesus says, there's all these people that are hungry. And he tells the disciples, get them something to eat. It was Philip who said, Jesus, it'll take over a year's wages to be able to buy enough food to serve all these people. Almost like, no way, Jose, sorry, Charlie, this ain't gonna happen. Even him doubting and kind of saying, there's no way that we could do this. This seems impossible. This is Philip. He says, let's wash those feet. Philip. Come here. We get Andrew. Andrew, he's a good guy. We have Andrew. Every time we see Andrew, he's bringing someone to Jesus. Whether it was a group of Greeks that were interested in getting to know Jesus, it was Andrew that brought them to Jesus. Whether it was his own brother, Simon Peter. Simon Peter was Andrew's brother, and Andrew's the one that brings Peter to Jesus. Also, again, with the fish and the loaves, the feeding the 5,000, it was Andrew that finds the little boy with the fish and the loaves and actually brings him to Jesus. And so every time we see Andrew, he's always bringing someone to Jesus. But hey, still, if you want to be great, then this is what you got to do. This is you got to serve, you got to love, you got to do this for someone else. We come to James, the second disciple named James, and you know what his name is? James the Less. I actually find it sad where you have to go through life with a title put on you to differentiate you from another disciple that's called James the Great, and he's called James the Less. We don't know why he's called James the Less. We really know nothing about him except for a few family members, and he was the brother of Jude, actually. We don't know much about this James, and maybe that's why he's called James the Less, but imagine going through life where this title is put on you, and it's like this, like you're less, you're inferior, you're like this insecurity has to get attached to you, and yet Jesus is like, I love you just the same as all the other 12, and I'm gonna wash your feet just like I do everybody else. And listen, if you want to be great, doesn't matter your name. If you want to be great, then this is what you got to do. You got to serve. Simon Peter. Good old Petey. Peter. Peter always gets it wrong. Peter always gets it wrong. I actually thank God for Peter, because it's like Peter gets it wrong and then Jesus has to explain to Peter why he got it wrong. And it's almost helpful for all of us so that we don't get it wrong, so that we could I feel like we don't make the first mistake. Like Peter took one for the team. And in classic Peter form, questions Jesus. He questions the teacher, the rabbi, the master. And Jesus comes over after he's washed all these feet. He's washed 22 feet already. And Peter says, no. You're not gonna wash, you can't wash my feet. That's out of order. And Jesus is saying, no. You wanna be great, you gotta serve. Just like if you want love, you gotta love. If you want friends, you gotta be friendly. If you want respect, you gotta be respectful. Like this is not out of order. This is the order of the kingdom. If you wanna be great, you gotta serve. This is what you gotta do. And he says, if I don't wash your feet, you have no part of me. In other words, we have no common ground. We can't walk together in unity and fellowship if I don't do this. And then of course, Peter gets it wrong again. He's like, oh, well in that case, give me a whole bath. Drown me in it. And Jesus, this is a very theological moment where he's like, no. It's like when you got saved, I washed you in the blood. Like you had a whole bath. Like what Jesus was about to do on the cross. Like we got saved. All of us, we get saved. We've been bathed fully. But as we walk through life, we go through things. As we walk through life, we go through rough situations, dirty situations. We get ourselves in some trouble. And so he's like, listen, I don't need to give you a whole bath. I just gotta wash your feet. I gotta cleanse the part that's actually coming in contact with the world. As we're walking, as we're going through life, as we're in and out of different situations, our feet get dusty, our feet get dirty, and we need Jesus to cleanse us. And this is not a one-time deal. This is an everyday thing where yesterday we walked through some stuff and now we come to Jesus and we can go, Jesus, I need you to cleanse me from yesterday, from this morning, whatever happened. And Jesus is there to constantly pick us up when we fall and cleanse us. And he gives us peace and he loves us daily and his grace and mercies are new every morning. Like, where would we be without this cleansing? I thank God he saved me. I thank God he forgives me and he continues to forgive me. Listen, we all mess up. I know I am a mess up. I know I am broken. I know I need help. I know the things I go through. I know the situations I face. I know I'm lost without God. I know I'm nothing without God. I'm like, God, I want to live clean. I want to be clean. I want to think clean. I want to talk clean. I want to walk clean. I want clean relationships. I want clean marriages. I want clean parenting. I want clean business dealings. I want clean internet searches. I want a clean life. Cleansing from all unrighteousness so we can sit in his house with a fresh start. So that the same way we walked in, we're not walking back out. We're leaving differently than the way we walked in here. So that we're not tracking the dirt from outside into the new house, into the new setting, into the new season, into the new moments in our life. I don't want to track yesterday's dirt into the new season that God is bringing me into. I need a fresh start. I need a cleansing. And so I say, God, would you forgive me? And would you help me to forgive others? Help me to do this for others as you've done unto me. And then after Jesus is done, he puts back on his clothes, his outer garment. He gets back in the master's uniform and says, hey, do you understand what I did for you? Now do it for one another so that you'll continually be clean and walk in unity on a regular basis. This is not a day one day done deal. It's ongoing, it's continuous, because we all need it. And it's like a life contract. Man, if I clean your feet or you clean mine, we are brothers for life. We are family for life. It says, now that you know these things, you'll be blessed if you do them. Even if it's not a good time for you, especially if it's not a good time for you. You're going through some stuff and you're like, man, everything just hasn't been working and I don't get it and I feel like God's not answering my prayers and I got this and I got this and I feel like everything's just going to hell, like nothing is working. That's actually, so many times we go through those rough periods and we're like, oh, I'm gonna throw in the towel. That's not the time to throw in the towel. That's time to pick up the towel and serve someone. Because Jesus says, if you know these things, you'll be blessed. If you need a blessing right now, I need you to pick up a towel and say, man, I want to serve, I want to get involved. I want to serve my brothers and sisters, whether they have a light dusting on their feet or it's just nasty, dirty. And listen, in the natural, in this world and whatever, like it's the norm to kick someone when they're down. It's the norm to chit chat about them. We easily become chatty patties and like, I'm guilty of this, I've done this plenty. And like, even as I'm building this sermon this week and I'm thinking about this, I'm like, God, I need your forgiveness. God, I need your cleansing. Like, God, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to declare I'm not going to celebrate my brother's failure. I'm not going to tell my sister I told you so. I'm not going to joke around about someone else falling. I'm not going to be divisive or condemning. I'm not going to gossip about it. I'm not going to open up the wound by making someone feel ashamed and embarrassed. Love covers. I'm not going to overlook the sin, but man, I want to help any way I can to restore them. I don't even need to know how the dirt got there. I don't need all the dirty details. I don't need to know the path they took to get here. I just want to get rid of it. I just want them to be clean. We can deal with all the other stuff later to make sure that it doesn't happen again. But for right now, I just want you to be clean, my brother. I just want you walking right, my sister. Just like Jesus took off that outer garment too. Man, I take off those outer garments. I take off that self-righteous, that self-entitled, judgy, like that thing as if I'm washing your feet, but I still got my, no, I get in the uniform of a servant and I just serve and I love. I take up the towel of mercy. I'm committed to getting my brothers and my sisters cleansed and reinstalled into the ministry that God's called them into. Every pour and every wipe and every rinse is out of love, wanting to see them walking clean again with a fresh start. We need Him. We need each other. I want to serve you when your feet are dirty. I want you to serve me when my feet are dirty. And I know it's not easy putting our dirty, stinky, messy situation in someone else's lap and being all exposed and all open and all vulnerable. But if we don't, we keep walking dirty. And so I need people in my life. I pray to God that when God comes back, not only does He find me with a towel in my hand, but I'm also surrounded by some brothers and sisters that are also holding towels. And I want to say, there's so many people in here that don't have a good circle of friends, that don't have a good circle of people that you could be open with and you could be exposed to and be vulnerable with and be like, hey, this is my dirty, stinky situation. I know it's nasty, but would you help? And if you don't have that person, I am going to pray. We're going to believe God today that God would bring that person in your life. But it's not only on God, it's also on us. That's why we talk serving. When you're in a ministry, you do life with one another. I do dinner with a bunch of these guys, because we're serving together. Like you just do normal life together in a community group. It's the same thing. You've got to do your part. I promise God will do His part. And all of a sudden you'll be like, oh, I'm not the only one going through the same thing. I'm not the only one going through that. Like, I'm not the only one that's dealing with this situation. You're like, oh, you're dealing with that too. And then you get a brother and a sister that you could be open with and vulnerable with, and you can wash each other's feet and help each other walk clean and refreshed and comforted. Oh, the intimacy, the transparency, the vulnerability.